Bye. Have fun.
Linda, it's 4:01. I'll call the meeting to order, and let's stand and do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, 1.2, adopt the agenda. Are there any adjustments to the agenda as it was posted? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to accept the agenda as presented.
I'll second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Bianca?
Aye.
Rosemary?
Aye.
Jeff?
Aye.
I also approve. And is adopted as posted. Item 2, public comments on items not on the agenda. Under this item, the public's invited to address the board regarding items that are not on today's agenda. Please keep your comments concise, brief, and limited to 3 minutes. The board is not allowed under the law to take action on matters that are not on the agenda. Should comments from the public pertain to a charge or complaint against an employee of Northern United Humboldt Charter School or Northern United Siskiyou Charter School, the board encourages the speaker to utilize the school's written complaint procedures to pursue the matter. The public will have an opportunity to comment on all agenda items as those are heard this afternoon. Are there any comments from the public on an item that is not on the agenda? Nope. All right. Moving on. Action items to be considered. Item 3.1. Approval of the telework policy, the second reading.
So this is exactly as you previously saw it in the first reading. There were no amendments made. So the recommendation is that it is approved as presented.
Are there any questions or comments? Anybody? Just some clarification, Sherry. So,
I have a couple of questions.
okay, you go first. Rosemary? Rosemary, looks like you're frozen.
Well, Jerry, maybe you go ahead and maybe she'll get unfrozen by the time you're done on your clarifications.
Okay, so
You can go Jerry or me. Okay.
go
I'm
ahead,
frozen?
Rosemary.
Yeah, you're frozen.
Can you hear me?
Just barely. You might want to try turning your video off. Rosemary, you want to speak to us now?
So you guys, my video off. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, it's a little better.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
Hello?
we hear you, Rosemary.
Go ahead, Rosemary.
Okay. I have a couple define. Oh, good. On page 1, can you define, we're talking the general requirements, second paragraph. Can you define what a non-exempt employee is?
Sure. And for those of you who maybe couldn't hear what she said, in the second paragraph under general requirements, she asked if we can explain what a non-exempt employee is. So exempt employees and non-exempt employees. Exempt employees are those that are usually on salary, but not always, but almost always on salary, and who are able to make decisions on major things without necessarily having to consult with anybody, and that supervise other employees. Non-exempt employees are usually hourly, paid by the hour as opposed to salary. They do not supervise other employees and usually have to, they aren't in charge necessarily of their own department or anything like that, and they would have to consult with a supervisor to make decisions. Those are both like legal terms that have to do with employment law within the state and the federal government. So there are rules about who are exempt and who are non-exempt employees. Teachers have been ruled as exempt employees, but non-exempt employees are, in schools are usually classified employees who are paid hourly.
Okay. Okay. And I have one more question suggestion.
Okay.
It is on the following page under supervisor responsibilities.
Okay.
Very last paragraph there, it talks about supervisors assessing employees' progress on a telework assignment periodically. Should periodically be defined? Were you able to hear me, Sherry?
Yes, I was able to hear you, Rosemary. You asked if periodically should be
Or
defined.
not?
It could be defined. Evaluations are defined. Not in this particular document, but they are in our employee handbook and in the policy regarding evaluations. But in terms of assessing progress, yes, I can hear you. Maybe you can't hear me.
Yes.
Can you hear me, Rosemary?
Right.
But we can define periodically if you would like in this policy. I think that that's referring to assessing like on a regular ongoing basis. So the supervisor would know.
It's just
Rosemary, maybe if you try logging out and logging back in.
to interpretation.
I think she's gone. Hopefully when she logs back in, it'll be better. Jerry, did you want to go ahead with your comments?
Well, as it turns out, I had one of the same questions that Rosemary did. What defines periodically?
Yeah.
Just how long is this? And, is there a set definition for periodically? I
Right.
can see it would be one thing if it were monthly, weekly, quarterly. whatever. So that was
what I
one.
was saying to Rosemary is I actually think that it's not defined, because I think that works in the employer's favor to not define it, meaning you can be assessing on a daily basis. If I see that an employee who is teleworking right now, if they're not responding to my emails, they're not responding to my phone call on a daily basis, they're not working. And so therefore I'm constantly assessing that. That's different than a formal evaluation or something like that. This is being able to, I think having it a little open like this is kind of a good thing, because, you know, I mean, I guess it wouldn't really matter, but if I said weekly, then is the supervisor then obligated to each week give some sort of report or something? I think this is more an informal thing. You know, you'll be assessing progress based on work completion, and that work completion doesn't have a particular timeline necessarily. You know, returning phone calls should be every day, returning emails should be every day, a particular project could be a week long. So I think that that in particular is referring to more of an informal process, where later in that paragraph it talks about the evaluation, which is the formal process. But I am totally open to putting something in there if periodic seems too vague, if like maybe ongoing basis, maybe that's better. Maybe that's more clearly defining what I'm, you know, trying to make it say, but I'm open to suggestions on that.
Well, it strikes me that, you know, there's two sides to this. So there's the supervisor side, and where it could be not specific. But if I'm the employee on the other side and I'm criticized for not, you know, periodically doing these things, and couldn't that employee raise the issue? Well, you didn't tell me how often. You know, if the supervisor's thinking once a week, but the employee is thinking once a month. So that I'm just trying to look at it.
I don't think that this isn't a formal thing. This is assessing is like all day long, every day. The employee is supposed to be working whatever their assigned hours are every day.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is allowing the supervisor, you know, to make sure, because working at home is like it's a privilege. It's not something that, you know, it's supposed to be at the benefit of the employer for that to happen, or at least not at the detriment of the employer. And so I think this is the idea of there's nothing formal. So an employee wouldn't say, oh, I thought you were going to assess me once a week. This is, were you working today? Were you, you know, at any time, if I notice somebody isn't responding or isn't making progress on tasks, then the idea of them working at home could be revoked. Like, you know, you're not making progress at home, therefore you need to be back in the office, that kind of thing. As opposed to each week, you know, somebody saying, okay, this week you did well. Every time I reached out, you were there, or something like that. I think this is more of an informal thought, but I don't know, maybe that's not clear in how it's written.
No, I'm just raising, sort of playing devil's advocate, just raising it, you know, hypothetically, just looking at it. I mean, is it clear from potentially both points of view?
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah,
I like ongoing.
Well, or, you know, the other option, Rosemary, I heard what you said, ongoing, that's an option, or taking out the word periodically. Supervisors will assess each employee's progress on a telework assignment to ensure, like, no time period in there.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think, Rosemary?
Or will continually assess each employee's progress.
Exactly. There's a lot of verbiage that we could put in there. that would fit.
Mhm. Should we just delete periodically?
I just wanted some clarification. And, yeah, if that's okay, or whatever everybody thinks.
Jeff, did you have a comment?
Yeah. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
Jeff.
Thought I'd just check first. You know, when I read through it, I seen the same word, but I don't read it. I didn't read it that way. I guess I didn't read it like it's not reassigning what the employee is doing. It's not a separate contract. It's, you know, and I guess I just kind of read through it. I mean, the word doesn't bother me either way. If you leave it in or take it out, I don't think it's going to be a stumbling stone, you know, for anybody that, you know, I just don't see it that way. I mean, I just think it's I think you kind of, I actually kind of think you kind of need the word. I mean, honestly, and there has to be something that has to measure what they're doing somehow, you know, in a certain time frame. So I don't know. It wouldn't be any different than if they're at the office, or it shouldn't be. So,
Right.
yeah.
Bianca, do you have any thoughts?
Similar to Jeff, you know, I didn't stumble across it as I read through it right there. I think that taking it out would speak more to what it is that you're trying to describe, Sherry.
Yeah.
So I can see where you're coming from, Rosemary. So I'm okay with taking it out or leaving it, but I do think taking it out would make it, again, more to the point of continuous assessing as a supervisor generally does.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, the fact that 2 of the 4 of you noticed it and felt that it was very vague, which I agree, it is very vague. To me, it seems like, okay, if we just take that out, we take away the vagueness piece of it and, you know, keep others from stumbling on that word as well. And Jerry, did you have any, sorry, go ahead.
No, well, I was just going to ask how everybody felt about that thought, taking it out. Is it okay with them? Okay. Rosemary, take it out or leave it in?
Mhm. No, I think we can take it out. Periodically is my stumbling word, so to speak.
So Rosemary,
Did you guys lose me again?
No, we still hear you. We heard you. You said take it out.
okay, okay, I wasn't
Yeah.
sure if she took it out. It's okay. The only other thing that Sherry, I had that jumped out at me under the section supplies, equipment, and furniture, 3rd paragraph. And I kind of know in advance what you're going to say, but I still have to point this out.
Okay.
Necessary technology that isn't available. So what's an X phone, cell phone?
X is example.
Oh, maybe it should say example. You know, the way you at first glance, you see it, it says, and that's how you would possibly do it.
Mhm.
An X cell phone.
Mhm.
So I just couldn't pass up pointing that out.
Mhm.
And, you know, an X cell phone. I understand it's an example, but
Yeah.
example typically would
I
say
think he's
EX
making
period.
fun of me.
It would be EX period to connotate example. Just something I noticed.
Okay.
Well, can I tell you what I noticed in that area?
Certainly, go ahead.
Where it says, the next paragraph up, it says employees shall not be entitled to reimbursement for their use of school property. That jumps out to me as who would be so bold as to ask for reimbursement when they're using school property?
Somebody probably was. That's why the lawyers put that in there.
Did you lose me again?
No, we still hear you.
Rosemary, it's another example of, I pointed something out with the, if I recall, language arts. And
That's it for me.
and it was how, the state or authority higher above us chose to write it. And so we're overruled. The lawyers, somebody wrote this policy and this is how they chose to state things. They obviously don't have your grammatical expertise background.
Mhm.
That's all that I have for that, Sherry. Linda.
So the periodically, the progress will be checked periodically. Did we make a decision to what that's going to be changed to?
Well, there hasn't been a motion yet.
Yeah, not yet.
I would like to say that leaving periodically in kind of leaves it at Sherry's discretion as far as checking employees' progresses that are working from home. It leaves sort of it's meant to be general, so to give her more room to define that with each employee.
I think not having it there does as well. It's not defined either, with a time period at all.
Okay.
I mean, you're still their supervisor. I mean, so it gives you the right to check no matter what. It doesn't matter if they're home, there, at the office, in between. I mean, if you're on the clock, I mean, I don't see that it makes a big difference one way or the other.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jeff's got a good point. Okay, are there any other comments, questions, clarifications needed for the second reading of this policy? No? Okay, so is there a motion to accept this as a second reading? Is there a motion to accept this with the amendment deleting the word periodically? What's the board's pleasure?
I'll make a motion to approve the telework policy with the amendment of removing the word periodic.
Good afternoon. This message is for Edward. Edward, my name is Rose.
And also the edit that Jerry suggested, for example.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Bianca?
Aye.
Rosemary?
How about a thumbs up?
Okay, good. Jeff,
Aye.
and I also approve. Motion carries.
I'll
Moving
second
on.
that motion.
Oh.
We've got it taken care of,
Aye.
Rosemary. Okay. Moving on to 3.2, approval of the reopening of NUCS facilities. Sherry.
Okay. I felt like maybe it was just me, but maybe everybody, I don't know. I felt like last week at our board meeting, there are so many things for us to decide around this issue that it might help if if I did something to kind of streamline it or clarify. So I'm going to share my screen really quickly just to show how I've kind of envisioning this particular item. Okay, so for item 3.2, the reopening, the current situation is we're currently in phase 2, which means home-based independent study with face-to-face for students who qualify for special education services. And then the reopening of facilities would happen on February 1st, 2021. That's the current situation. That's how things stand right now. Keeping in mind February 1st is the first day of spring semester. The recommendation that staff is making is to move to phase 3, which allows for small intervention groups to come onto the facilities, and then a closure after extended school breaks. So closing the facilities for some duration of time after the facilities, either 1 week or 2 weeks, that would need to be determined. So that's the recommendation. Other options, of course, because those are just staff recommendation. It's the board's prerogative to approve, to make a motion and approve what you would like. So alternative options could be reopening the facility on an alternative date rather than February 1st. Like, for example, January 19th was a date that we discussed last week, though another date could happen too. And allowing individual centers to open prior to February 1st. And again, a date would need to be selected. So those are other options that could be voted on by the board. I just wanted to point out some additional considerations, and maybe this is moving a little ahead of ourselves, but if, for example, the board votes to have closures of the facilities after extended breaks, so for example, after Thanksgiving or after winter break or President's Week, if the board votes to have the facilities closed for a week or 2 weeks after that, does that closure, that pause, apply to the students who receive special education services? And does that closure apply to intervention groups? So those are things that if the board did vote to close after breaks, those are things I would want to have clarified. So I'm going to scroll back up here. And maybe I'll stop sharing my screen now, but I hope this helped for this particular item, giving the current situation, what staff recommendation is, other options, which of course I could have written many, many, many things. All the options are, kind of endless really. And then those additional considerations. So I'm going to stop sharing because I think it's easier for everybody to see each other when I'm not sharing my screen. And I think, that's it for me at this particular moment. I'll open it up to the board.
Are there any comments, questions for Sherry? Statements? Jeff?
So, I mean, since we talked last week, there's been a big jump in Siskiyou and Humboldt County to the negative, the way I kind of look at it. And, if I'm kind of looking at the data correctly, it seems to be, and what the health department's suggesting, that there should be no gatherings. We're not encouraging people to gather at restaurants. I mean, just some public things, let alone schools themselves. So I think it's kind of taken this thing to another level, at least for me. I mean, I'm seeing it a little differently than I saw it last week. I was hopeful, but at this point in time, I'm kind of leaning just to keep things the way they are. And I get what people are saying. I'm seeing the messages, I'm reading it. I understand it. I have empathy for that. I wish I could wave a wand and fix everything, but that's not what the reality is. You know, the way statistics are stacking up, it seems to be, you know, the more groups are getting together, the more the numbers are rising quickly. And I can see through the holidays that it would happen even quicker than what it's showing now. So that's my piece.
Anyone else?
Rosemary's hands up. Jerry, are you able to see the blue digital hands on people's pictures?
No.
Okay, I'll tell you when I see a hand up, Rosemary,
Okay.
and you're just taking questions from the board right now, correct? Because we do have a
Correct.
member of the public that has their hand up too. But right now, I thought I heard you say that you're asking for the board's input at this particular moment.
Yes. So
Okay,
Rosemary?
Rosemary's hands up.
No, I changed computers. Can you guys hear me better?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Oh, good.
Yes.
It's a
Okay.
lot better.
Okay. I'm just going to piggyback on what Jeff said. And I believe I heard on the news last night, and it was stated schools specific, everything is status quo. Am I correct in that, or am I not, Sherry?
I'm not sure I know what you mean about everything is status quo, but we're in the red tier. Schools are allowed to have in-person learning in the red tier.
Okay, but
Rosemary,
yes?
I believe what they said was that for schools that were to basically maintain the status quo, so that schools that were closed don't open.
Right, right. And with that,
That's if you're in the
status
purple
quo-
tier.
But with that status quo statement, does that or does that not give us a little flexibility to modify?
Well, it's the purple tier. If you're in the purple tier and you were already open, you get to stay open. In the purple tier, if you were closed, you have to stay closed. The red tier, that's not the same. But again, keeping in mind, our next item is the reopening criteria. Based on the criteria that I have given you the draft for already, we couldn't open now anyway because of the red and the purple tier that our counties are in. That's, you know, that's not really, we know that, you know, if we go with that criteria that I proposed, we wouldn't be able to open right now. And so I'm not asking for us to do that. I'm not recommending for us to do that, to go back to in-person learning right now.
Mm-hmm.
Anything more, Rosemary?
No.
Bianca, what are your thoughts?
For the most part, I agree with Jeff. I don't want to add to the problem. However, my concern is when I think about, you know, well, let me back up. What I heard from teachers last week was that they feel that they have students who are falling so far behind that it is in their best interest to get these few people, these few students into a room for one reason or another. So I am very concerned about that. And if the teachers believe that they can make the tough decisions and have the tough conversations with parents, then I feel that I need to trust that and move forward to the phase 3. I'm particularly concerned for high school students, especially seniors who are going to be going to college next year, or applying for colleges or technical programs or whatever the case may be. But the point is that especially those students I am concerned for, because they have a big step ahead of them. And if their teacher thinks that they need to come in once a week for intervention or whatever the case may be, then again, I want to give our teachers and our staff the ability to make those tough decisions for very, very, very few students. But I'd like to hear from the public and you as well, Jerry, but that's what I am thinking right now. And I don't know if that means that we need to put parameters on how many students at once or how many times, just to, help make those groups very, very small and illustrate what we mean when we say that we don't want to be a part of the problem, because obviously with the way that both counties have flipped backwards, that something is going wrong. Here in Siskiyou County, the schools that were open for small cohorts have now shut down and they've gone back. And talking to folks in the community, that's extremely frustrating for parents because they have to completely change their schedules. They were getting used to, again, being able to go back to work or have the one small child in the house or whatever the case may be, and now it's all tossed up back in the air again. And I don't want us to do that. And I think with phase 3 that would likely not be the case. So that's where I'm at, and I'd like to hear your thoughts, Sherry, and anybody else from the public, including staff and teachers.
Thank you, Bianca. Sherry, let's call on members of the public. Let's hear.
Sure. And I'm going to ask that people, if you're willing, to state your name when you speak, because our secretary who's taking the minutes writes down who is attending the meeting. So when you speak, if you would state your name, unless your name is already on the screen, but there are some people that it's not their full name. So it would be helpful if you said your full name. Okay, and Judy's hand is up, and I'm guessing that's Judy Nelson.
You would be correct. It's me again.
Hi, Judy.
Nelson. I'm a parent at the Willow Creek Learning Center. And, I do understand that things have potentially changed since last week. And though I don't want to dwell on the past, I feel like this has been extremely frustrating because I feel like by moving so slowly, we have missed an opportunity, right? And so I am extremely frustrated about that. I'm extremely frustrated that, again, it's not like we would rush right now to reopen before we hit the purple if we're going to, but because this was done so slowly, I feel we really have lost an opportunity. And so I request that in future, if there is any possible way to make this process more nimble so that things can move quickly if things change, I just think that is super important because I feel like we missed the boat here, and it's hard to deal with because, again, to me, and I've stated this, it's like, it's not that disruptive to have to change your schedule. It's like if you have to be home and not working because you have to be home homeschooling your kid, most people are going to appreciate any time that they can resume their normal schedule and not, if the kids can be in school. I don't know about the disruption being an argument to not reopen, right? Not to mention that while all of this is challenging for us as parents, it is supposed to be about the kids' education. And so while, yes, this is very challenging for me, time-wise, economically, all of these things, I can deal with that because I want my kid to have a quality education. I want him to be able to socialize with his peers. And so that's my second point, is the disruption is not a reason, right? And then to the 2-week break thing with the reopening, I personally feel that can be dealt with other ways. You know, I think especially, again, I'm only speaking about the Willow Creek Learning Center because I do not know anything about the other ones. But if we're saying that like the disruption is a reason not to resume, well, that's a disruption, right? If when we go on a break, if we can't figure out a way for people to state or certify, and again, in our learning center, I feel that we are fairly accountable to each other and that people are going to be responsible. And especially if it's stated outright, look, if you are going out of town, you are doing that with the knowledge that your kid cannot then come back to school for 2 weeks after, or possibly until you have a negative test or something like that. But I would just encourage you guys to look at different options rather than automatically taking a 2-week break from in-person learning. Hopefully, once we do resume, just because there's been a school break, because there's a lot of school breaks. We've had a lot of time off of school, and that would be even more. So again, thank you. And I just hope that we can find a way to make it a little bit more fluid going forward, so that we can move as the numbers shift and change, because I think that's just where we're going to be for the whole rest of the year.
Thank you, Judy. Is there someone else?
No one else has their hands up.
Okay, so I'll give my thoughts. So this is really quite complex and complicated. There's no doubt that the virus is among us. And the news that came out yesterday, it's not all about, you know, potentially it happened. There's no doubt. It happened. It wasn't that this was potentially going to happen. It happened. And it's, to one degree or another, it's been bound to happen. This was predicted long ago as we entered into the winter months, colder weather, inclement conditions outside, forcing people inside, that in conjunction with cold and flu season, you know, it's like a perfect storm. The lack of nimbleness, I would say, is once we agree on the criteria, that's the first step in making things more fluid. Had we been opened and then with the news that we have just received in both counties, then, you know, we'd be looking at altering the program again. You know, there are no easy answers. I mean, I understand, for me personally, in my particular situation, my wife and I don't make a point of going out. We limit our excursions, and certainly when we do, we take all the precautions because we're of an age group that's in that vulnerable segment. But yet at the same time, I know how disruptive it can be. Families rely on children being in school so that they can go to work. That's the childcare. They have accommodations for after school, you know, and other activities. I know how disruptive that can be. My own son and his family just experienced that. Everything was turned upside down. through no fault of their own, getting exposed via a teacher. The huge, and I referred to this last week, and Sherry and I have talked about this months ago, long before it's constantly in the news now. What are we going to do with the upcoming major vacations? Is it likely to expect people to limit their travel or their gatherings to just their immediate bubble? While one group can maintain that, yes, we can all be held accountable and we're all going to do this. While that might be true, I just worry that that's extremely hard to maintain and follow through. And all it takes is one incident, one individual, and the history is replete with one event, one individual, and it's just snowballed and has wreaked havoc on lots of others. So typically the school board or the board of directors takes a global view of things. We try to look at the big picture, the whole picture. And once we have certain processes and components in place, then I believe we feel better about moving forward and agreeing on allowing, for certain things to happen. And so I'm just not right now comfortable in looking at changing our status quo, even for the recommendation of the phase 3. I mean, should we decide that that's something we want to agree on, I'll be advocating that it be just strictly one-on-one, not a group, not 2 or 3. And believe me, having been a former classroom teacher as well as a school administrator, I get it educationally. And that's just extremely frustrating for me. But you can't wave a wand and make it all disappear and get us all back to normal. Who honestly knows when, quote, normal is going to be? When are we going to be able to return to, quote, normal? So
Gary, I just want to let you know there's a couple hands up now too, members of the public.
Okay, so those are my thoughts. So let's take it, some of the comments from the public then. Okay,
Julie was first, Julie Smith.
I'll go ahead and wait. Let's get the public if there's somebody else, Sherry.
Well, there was, but the hand went down. So it says Riley's iPhone. I'm not sure who that is, but if you wouldn't mind when you unmute saying your name so that our secretary can write your name in the minutes, and then you can go ahead and speak.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we hear you very well.
Hi, my name is Riley Morrison. I'm a parent of 2 children at the Willow Creek program. I just want to thank the board and all the participants today for having this conversation and for all the time it takes. I really appreciate it. I'll keep my comments brief and short. I just feel like it's important, as much as we're attempting to predict the the bend in the road, to just really stay focused on the fact that there are children who are not getting their needs met, and to assume that re-entering at what was normal before and making plans based upon that, I don't think is appropriate. I think the quicker that we can work together to find the needs of the children specifically who aren't being met and the ways to keep them safe is really the key. And I just want to reiterate that waiting for that perfect moment is never going to be. And the quicker that we can all communicate and make plans, I believe that the children and the parents and the teachers will benefit. And I'll go on mute. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments.
So Julie was the next one.
So a few things. We're talking about something in the future because there are several steps that have to be taken prior to us being open on any level. You know, the first thing that has to happen is that each center has to have a reopening plan. So that has to be submitted to Sherry. We're almost moving into the holidays as far as Thanksgiving. It's going to take some time to put together the reopening plan, which is it's not an easy thing to do. I've been working on it all day and having to send it back to Sherry back and forth. So my understanding when we had this first board meeting was that we were talking about looking at the possibility of January 19th, opening up with our small pods. So here we are at November, whatever we are, 17th, and we still have like a couple of months to go. So I kind of just want to bring that out, that I don't think that this is something that we're going to jump right into tomorrow anyway, because we are moving into Thanksgiving. We do have to write our opening plans. They have to be submitted to Sherry. She has to okay them. So that's number one. You know, number two, as far as the manner in which we come back after breaks, how we decide to do that is a really important thing, but there's definitely wisdom behind having some amount of downtime after a break. Now, whether that be like, I don't remember who spoke, Judy, I think it was, said that parents have to sign some form of an agreement that they are not leaving town, and all of us know our families, et cetera, whether it be that we take a week or two off. I don't know what the answer is there, but there has to be some safeguards put in after being gone for a long period of time. I think that that's absolute. And then kind of the third thing that I would like to say is that in looking at our opening plans and writing our opening plans, we're having to go into the classrooms and we're having to see how many students we actually can hold safely. I think Sherry sent me information today that a cohort is considered to be 14. Obviously, we aren't looking at bringing back on January the 19th, a cohort of 14. But as I spoke last time, I have about 10 kids in different grade levels that would not be there on the same day. I think on the same day, I would have maybe 3 kids that would be there, or 3 students who would be there. So I guess what I'm saying with all these words is that we're talking about something that's a little bit in the future. We don't know what the future is going to look like. I think at some point we are going to have to wean ourselves in and practice all of these protocols for whatever's going to happen in spring break. We don't know. Obviously, if we move into the purple, you know, then that's a whole different story. But we don't know what we're going to be looking like in January the 19th. So I guess what I'm saying is that some of this is just kind of hanging out there. You know, I mean, no, I don't think today we're going to go back because nobody's ready to go back, including Willow Creek. I don't know that Willow Creek has submitted their plan to Sherry. And these were things that we have to do prior to ever opening our doors. So that's just something I wanted to throw out there.
And Marianne Lyons has her hand up, Jerry.
Okay, thank you, Julie. Thank you. Marianne, go ahead.
Hi, guys. Sorry it's a little bit late for the meeting, and if it's already been discussed, I apologize. But while we're talking about opening for pods, I still, and Kathy Shermer and a couple of us others are really concerned with some of our students that I feel are really needing tier 3 intervention, and waiting until January to meet with them, especially if they're high school students. I don't know how I'm going to be able to give some of them a passing grade. I've got one student, for example, who lives with a grandparent, and there's 4 other little kids at home, and he has no quiet space to get anything done. If I could even have him come in one-on-one for even just 2 hours a week, it would be the difference between him failing and passing some of his classes. And I feel like I can't, I mean, if I have no choice, but I guess I can socially distance in a parking lot. I don't know what to do. I just need to, but he needs to be able to, and I've got about 2 or 3 students like that that are high, they're, especially my high school ones, that are at risk of failing classes if I can't meet them out of Zoom. They have ADHD, they have other issues going on, and just a quiet space to work even 2 hours a week is a difference between their success and failure as high school students. And that's my personal big concern with my students. So I'm not trying to look for opening up or even in small pods or anything. There's a few kids that need help right now. They don't need help in February. And that's where my concern is. And I just wanted to express that again, like I did last week. Thank you.
Thank you, Marianne. Anybody else?
No more hands, Jerry. No more hands.
No more hands. Any follow-up thoughts? Bianca?
No, my opinion hasn't changed regarding how I feel about going to phase 3. I would be open to, as you suggested, Jerry, doing one-on-one instead of it being 2 or 3 students. No, I guess I would like to clarify when I was speaking about disruption, so as to not seem insensitive. The disruption doesn't just happen, I understand that, to the parents and their schedules at work, but to the education, right? There's teachers here in Siskiyou who are now scrambling because of our shutdowns to figure out how to get their students back on Zoom and back on track to where they were 2 weeks ago from being in the classrooms twice a week. So I would like to clarify that education is of the utmost importance. But otherwise, Jerry, no. Looking at my notes here, I want to thank Riley and Judy, and of course our staff, for coming out today.
Thank you, Bianca. Jeff, any other thoughts now or comments?
Man, it's hard. And I'm listening to Mary, and I mean, I love her passion. I mean, you can't, that's the best it gets when you're in education. I mean, I love hearing that and love seeing it. And as she was talking, my question in my own head was, what happens if Mary gets COVID? Where do we go from there? I mean, now we lose her for a while, or, whatever. I mean, I don't know there's a backup plan for Mary, or, somebody, I mean, and I guess I'm kind of with you, Jerry. I mean, it just takes one. And I'd love to lean towards, meeting one-on-one, because I see those kids falling through the cracks. I certainly understand it. And I don't know how to stop it without endangering somebody. And that's the thing that weighs on me as a board member. I don't want to endanger anybody. And, and I'm sorry for, I think it was Judy, but, this is cumbersome. but it needs to be in a certain way to manage this, because we can't see ahead. Julie's right. I mean, next week this thing could really flip on our heads. So, to try to see out weeks or months, I don't think that would even be responsible. I think we just make the decision as we go, as it's presented to us. And I think it's kind of unfolding in front of us. So it's, to me, I mean, some things are not that hard to decide. But I still see the empathy in the argument. I truly get it. So that's my comments.
Jerry, I'm just going to interject for just a quick second, because one of the things that I didn't mention is yesterday, Dr. Terry Frankovich, who is the Humboldt County Public Health doctor, called a meeting, kind of an emergency meeting with all the school superintendents yesterday afternoon. And she had a couple things she wanted to discuss with us and ask us for some feedback. I just received an email from her at 4:50, so like 11 minutes ago, where she's issuing new guidance, where she writes it as she's strongly recommending that schools move to a distance learning for the 14-day period following the Thanksgiving holiday. Although schools have done a remarkable job of implementing preventative measures to promote safety in on-site education, we anticipate a marked increase in local infections due to travel and gatherings occurring around Thanksgiving. This would threaten rapid identification and containment of cases, leading to increased transmission in the school setting. So Public Health, Humboldt County Public Health is recommending that 14-day closure after Thanksgiving break. So I just wanted to point that out, as we move forward into whatever motion somebody's going to make. And there are now a couple hands. They are from people that have spoken already, Jerry. So just let me know if you want to move forward with the board making a motion, or if you want to continue to hear public comments. Well, we have Judy Nelson and Mary Ann Lyons with their hands up.
Okay, as I've gone around, the next up would be Rosemary, to see if Rosemary has any new thoughts or comments now.
Thank you. I appreciate our parents coming, as I'm sure everyone on the board does as well. Julie has kept us very grounded in the process from the education side of all of this, so to speak. Mary Ann has so much passion for educating her kids, as all of the educators do. They are surrogate parents. They want what's best for their kids, so to speak, as do the parents, as do we as a board. We can't predict the future. We cannot please everyone. I feel that we need to do what's to the best of our ability, what we're hearing from our educators, health department, and what truly is in the best interest of our children.
Thank you, Rosemary. Okay, Sherry, why don't you recognize
we have Judy Nelson.
Okay, Judy.
Okay, I think Mary Ann actually had her hand up first, but I'll just be quick. I just think, I think, Jeff, that, you don't want anyone to be harmed. Yes, there is a chance that at any time, any one of us who is like out in public at all, whether that's just leaving your house to go to the grocery store once a week or whatever, you're like, yes, life is a risky proposition. You might get hit by a car walking down the street. You never know, right? But I think that we're discussing potential harm, right? But I would just request that the board remember that there is actual current harm that is occurring currently for sure by the kids not being in school. And yes, there is this potential harm that may occur of someone catching the coronavirus and getting sick and even potentially dying. But I guess it's there is another side to it. And I just have to say that out loud.
Thank you, Judy. Mary Ann?
Hi again, guys. I heard your concerns for me as a teacher, and I appreciate that very much. But we have teachers that are now meeting IEP students in person and using proper protocols. And I'm just asking for the ability to meet students that are in the red, in the highest red zone, with the same safety protocols in place, one-on-one. I have a large room at the center. I have a separate door entrance, and I have put all the protocols in place in there. And I just want to be able to, and the intervention might not even have to last forever. I feel that if I'm not able to intervene with these students and just have them have a quiet place to sit down, and me being 12 feet away on the other side of the room while they are just sitting there, and I can work with them. The board is 10 feet away from them too. I'm very aware of protocols. I'm helping restaurants manage protocols, which is even crazier right now. But I just want to say that I do take my health and my safety very seriously. And it does outweigh anything, because like you said, I have to be here to be able to teach. But I also feel that there's just, a couple students that are so far falling in the red, and I don't want to, I would feel bad giving them a missed assignment letter when they're not, their living situation isn't conducive for them to get work done. Do you see what I mean? So how do I balance that when I'm that risk? So for me, it's just simply those few students, those one-on-one students that I would not have, just meeting with them. Again, I feel if it can be done with students that already have IEPs, these are students that are in extreme risk as well. They're in the red, they're failing, they need help now. And that's all I'm going to say about that. I've said my piece more than once now. Thanks for listening again, you guys.
Thank you. Jeff?
I actually have a question for you, Marianne. Is the facility that you use only used by you, and you're the only teacher that uses it?
Kat, we have separate days. The way it works, it's there in the center where Wendy works, and we have our protocols in place. And we originally assigned days, but I keep my files there. Kathy Shermer comes in sometimes to do her lab on a Tuesday. She has a study hall, and she does that study hall from 10 to 12 on Tuesday, and that's the only time she's in the room, and nobody else uses the room. Okay. It's just sitting there empty, and it's a big room. It's, which one it is. It's the one that's been remodeled, and it would be really, quite honestly, it's the easiest to clean, and it would be the perfect place if somebody needed to do a one-on-one intervention, because it does have the ability to be so spaced apart and still be able to meet with a student in person. We already have partitions, we have masks, we have cleaners. Even when I go in and sit down, I clean it. And it does have a separate entrance, so no student goes through the library. They enter from the outside directly into that room, and it has a bathroom there, so that there's no reason for that student to be in any other room in the building. And I did in the beginning of the year to get students and parents, my new students and parents, their supplies. For my little students, that's what we kind of had to do in the very beginning. And I still only met with one student per day. We'd all decided amongst ourselves, Judy Frazier, myself, and Kathy Shermer, who are the only people who would even be using that room ever. We decided already that we wouldn't meet students there the same day if we did meet them. But it hasn't been necessary. Judy Frazier doesn't go in there, but if she did, she had chosen the third Thursday of every month, and that was it. So there's very little access, but I know that Kathy Shermer would also like to probably on a different day if she's expressed the ability to be able to do that. She hasn't said she needs students who would need it at this time, but she would like to have that option as well. So, but nope, that room's just basically sitting there empty.
Okay.
And it's
Thank you for that.
not even carpet. There's nothing in there. It's a wonderful room that could be used to do some red line intervention for sure. Thanks for asking.
Thank you for that clarification. Yeah, just in my head, just to kind of see what actually goes on in that specific location. So.
Okay, thank you, Marianne.
There's one more hand, and it's Julie.
Jerry, I'll be
Go ahead,
very
Julie.
quick.
All right.
I'll be very quick.
Go ahead.
So can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So first and foremost, I do agree with Mary Ann that those students who are in the red, and when we're saying in the red, those that we have star tested who are in definite need of help are the students that we are looking at. But I want to again go back to a timeline. The timeline being that we are moving into Thanksgiving break. Next week is Thanksgiving break. And then Frankovich just said that we needed to take 2 weeks off after, after Thanksgiving. That butts us up right next to Christmas break. And so when I go back to the timeline of January 19th, it's not that I'm pulling that out of the air. It's something that Sherry discussed early on. And when we look at what we're looking at with timelines and needing to take off time, I want to just continue to bring up the fact that we have to have, not just saying we have protocols in place. We have to have things written out. They have to be submitted to Sherry. They have to be signed by every one of our parents so that our parents know exactly what all of our protocols are. So while I'm totally with Mary Ann and I want to see this happen, I want to see this happen and I want us to do it right. And I want us to follow with all the guidelines that we have been talking about and the dates and the time that are realistic. In reality, if you look at our calendar, we are looking at probably January is what we're really looking at. So I just want to bring that up again, and then I'm going to shut my mouth and I'm going to mute myself. But the reality is the dates that we're looking at really do move into January. I'm done.
Thank you, Julie. Thank you. So Sherry, are there any other hands? No?
No, there aren't.
Okay. So let's get back to the question before us. The item to be considered is approval of the reopening of Northern United Charter. And so just to go back and review, you can look in the packet, and we're currently in phase 2. And the recommendation is to move to phase 3. Now, I have heard, Mary Ann weighed in on it, and I had actually also stated it that the phase 3, which, as it's stated, is establish learning hubs of very small groups of students. So it says groups of students. We've had some discussion where it's one student, it's one-on-one, not a group. So, and then the other aspect to this is closing school facilities for 1 to 2 weeks after extended school breaks. I mean, the typical recommendation is going back to if somebody believes that they've had exposure, 10 depends upon, I guess, your source, 10 days or 14 days quarantine. So that fits with the second part of the requested or recommendation of approving closing school facilities for 1 to 2 weeks after extended school breaks. And if you stop and look at it, you pull out your calendars, I mean, Julie is spot on about that. Again, something that Sherry and I had talked about some time ago. So we have Thanksgiving break, and then really there's a relatively short turnaround time before Christmas, New Year's break. And so if we institute 1 week or even 2 weeks, we're right up against the holiday break. And then after you come back from that in January, we're looking at another 1 to 2 weeks. And that's just being prudent. That's just being prudent. So there's, Sherry, would you like to reshare your screen for the options to
Absolutely.
To help my fellow board members in making a motion?
Sure. So just to reiterate, I listed out here the current situation, what our recommendation was, and any alternative options, not any, but some alternative options that the board, it's at the board's prerogative to make a motion for. So I think that's all we need is for a board member to make a motion. And if it's seconded, then, vote can happen.
Okay.
Gary,
Yes, Jeff.
I guess just to kind of piggyback what Julie was saying, I think maybe we need to add the wording or that the plans, the opening part of it, we can open by then if all the plans are submitted, prior to and approved of, or, something to that effect. So
That's actually in the next agenda item, Jeff. That having the plan submitted is one of the things in the reopening criteria that I recommended. And so when we get to that item, we'll definitely hammer out all of those pieces. But I think it probably, goes without saying that whatever is decided during this item, we would only open if we meet the criteria that moves, that we decide on in the next item.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay, my fellow board members, who's willing to take the leap?
Well, I just want to
Certainly.
The schedule real quick. So if we were to move to, for example, phase 3, one-on-one meeting with students who are in the red and who are needing intervention, that would allow teachers 1 week 1 week between Thanksgiving and Christmas or winter break to meet. And then after winter break, before Martin Luther King week, there would not be any time, because if we presume that we'll take the heed of our public health official, which I lean towards, there would not leave anything. And so then that would leave just 1 week before the 19th. Is that correct? Because I don't
actually, no, it would be no weeks before the 19th.
No weeks before the 19th.
No weeks before the 19th. And so then there would be 4 weeks. No, there would be 2 weeks before fully reopening on February 1st. So in other words, we would only be able to meet with these intervention groups for a total of 3 weeks. The week that happens between Thanksgiving and winter break,
right,
and then the two weeks between when we came back from the break after winter break prior to semester 2.
Okay.
Does that make sense? So winter break, we come back from winter break. If we took 2 weeks off, our first day back would be January 19th.
Okay. And then if we went with the February 1st reopening pending we meet the criteria that we're going to decide upon.
Right, we would have 2 weeks prior to that. Mhm.
Okay, and I just, if we did decide to move forward with the phase 3 plan, teachers don't necessarily need, there may be teachers who do not have students who need intervention.
Correct.
Be upon the teacher's decision to meet with the student one-on-one.
Correct. What would happen is I would notify all the staff that this has been approved and, ask if anybody had anybody that they felt like they needed to meet with. And they would have to, run that by me, let me know who they were planning on meeting with and what the reasoning for that meeting is. And then they would, be able to meet with them. I would have to find out like what the procedure would be. Is it a face-to-face meeting? Is it, once a week, twice a week, all of those kinds of things.
So not much time.
Yeah, not a lot of time. But I do feel like staff feels like something is better than nothing, especially for those high school students where, when the semester ends, that's when some of their classes end. They're not all year-long classes, and it makes a big difference with their credits.
Okay. Well, I'm comfortable making a motion if there's no other questions or comments.
I would like just to make one further comment. It's just occurred to me, and it's kind of goes along with comments that Julie made tonight and then also last week. The reality is the logistics are such that we could not open a center tomorrow.
Mhm.
The reality is that we could not open a center. Maybe the soonest would be a week, but then we're into Thanksgiving. And so you start building in those realities, time to write the plan, submit it, get it approved. For better or worse, like it or not, that's what really needs to happen. We have to have some kind of criteria that we all feel good about, justifying taking a calculated risk. And so you could just pull out your calendar and look, just basically run the numbers, run the number of days, and you can see where we end up. So don't let me prevent you from making a motion, Bianca.
Well, when we talk about reopening, that's different from phase 3 though, right, Jerry? So when we talk about reopening.
Yes, right. But yes.
So I'll make a motion to approve NUCS moving into phase 3, allowing one-on-one intervention with teachers and also accepting the extended closure after school breaks.
For how long? One, or you want to specify?
The 2 weeks as recommended by our health officials.
Okay.
I'll second that.
Okay, because of the nature of this, I'm going to kick into real parliamentary procedure. So it has been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? All right. Then I'll close discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Bianca?
Aye.
Rosemary?
Aye.
Jeff?
Aye.
And I also approve. The motion carries. So Linda, did you get that? Phase 3 to one-on-one, limited to one-on-one, and 2-week closure after extended school breaks. Okay. All right,
Gary?
good. Yes,
Did-
Rosemary?
Did Bianca specify one-on-one or did she say small group?
No, she said one-on-one.
One-on-one.
Okay.
You know, can I ask for what was the board's intent in terms of those 2-week closures after the extended breaks? Do those mean that staff would not be doing their one-on-one meetings? Or can staff continue their one-on-one meetings during those 2-week closures after breaks? Bianca, what was
Gary,
your
can you
intention
repeat
when you made the
that?
motion?
My intention was for there not to be any meetings after the breaks. Yes, I think that there could be a way to have waivers signed, but that was my intention.
Okay. Rosemary, did you hear the question?
I didn't hear the first part of what you said.
Okay, I was just wondering if it was the board's intention that for those 2-week closures after the extended holidays, does that mean that staff could not do their one-on-one meetings during those time periods as well? I mean, obviously for Thanksgiving, there's not any other meetings, but you know, these breaks are going to happen in the spring too, like President's Week and spring break. And so I just wanted to make sure that we were totally clear. Can the intervention groups happen during those facility closures after extended breaks?
Now, Bianca had indicated perhaps a waiver being signed. In addition to that, can it be up to the teacher's discretion?
So our legal counsel has said waivers don't work in California,
Right.
pretty much. You can't sign away, you're right.
Right.
But
correct.
what we can ask them to sign is an assumption of risk, and that was the form I shared with you last week. And so we can have families sign an assumption of risk. Just making sure that they're aware that what they're doing is a risky behavior. Of course, staff would also be, you know,
Right.
being involved in a risky
Right.
behavior. So that is something that we can do, is that have people sign that assumption of risk. But I just wanted to make sure that we were all on the same page, what your thoughts were for those 2-week closures.
So do we have a consensus for that? Is there anybody that objects to that? Bianca, Jeff, Rosemary? Okay. So there's consensus, Sherry, for that.
Consensus that staff will not meet with students during that
No,
time?
no,
Or that
no,
they
no,
will with an
that-
assumption of risk?
Right, it's some assumption of risk, both student and staff.
Okay, thank you. All right.
Okay.
At the discretion of the instructor,
Yeah,
because they might feel that they have made enough progress to not meet until the that period ends.
absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's all driven by the teacher.
Okay, thank you for that clarity.
Okay, moving on to 3.3, approval of the reopening criteria for Northern United Charter School facilities.
Jerry,
Okay.
can we take a small break?
Certainly. It's 5:31. You want 10 minutes?
5, it's fine.
5? Okay. Let's reconvene at say 5:40.
Thank you.
Perfect. I'm gonna go put some wood on the fire.
Although I don't see Jeff back. Let's go ahead. We've got a long ways to go still. So let's get this meeting rolling. So Linda, we're reconvening at 5:40. There he is. Okay. So I'd already announced the item to be considered, 3.3. So take it away, Sherry.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen again. Just a very quick reminder for item 3.3, the current situation is we do not currently have any reopening criteria. And I recommend that we develop the reopening criteria during this meeting using what we worked on last week as a starting point. And then some additional reopening criteria once we do have, or some additional things to consider. Once we do have a reopening criteria in place, and let's say we're open, it's after February 1st, and we've been able to open in our cohort model. And if something happens that makes it so we have to close again, in other words, we don't meet something on our reopening criteria and we have to close again, do those closures apply to the intervention groups, those one-on-one potential meetings? So we can just get back to that, but I just want you to be keeping that in mind too. Okay, so here is the document that we were working on last week. So you'll remember there were 7 items here that we started with, and we were making notes as we were going along. The first one was the county positivity rate and new cases rate. That's what I had recommended originally. But I asked if we could change it from leave the county positivity rate as reported and change the average for new cases, average number of daily cases, change that to adjusted case rate. And again, my rationale was because that's how the county office reports it. I mean, not the county office, the county public health department reports it. And I would rather just use the data that's readily available so that it's open to everybody. So that was my recommendation for number 1. Number 2, counties at an overall community risk level of minimum or moderate for 4 consecutive weeks. We played with the idea of changing 4 to 2 because, as you'll recall, when we met last week, your county has to remain, you have to hit the target for that particular tier for 2 weeks before you're moved. Well, as I updated you earlier this week, that was actually changed. Now the county will be moved into a new tier after 1 week's worth of data. So I don't know if that changes how you want to, list this criteria. We had talked about 2 weeks because that aligned, because I think Bianca pointed out that would be actually 4 weeks of good data, because 2 weeks before you were moved into the tier, and then another 2 weeks after that. But now that to be moved, you're in it for 1 week. So I don't know if we want to discuss the time period that we would have to be in either the minimal or moderate tier to be reopened. Should we work on these one by one, or should I just go through the overview and then we go back one-on-one?
Let's do it as we go through the list.
Okay, then let's go back to 1. Number 1. Is everybody okay with the idea of changing average number of daily cases to adjusted case rate? I see Rosemary nodding her head. Bianca's got a thumbs up. Jeff's got a thumbs up. Okay, so I think we've come to a conclusion on number 1 then. County positivity rate and adjusted case rate. Okay, number 2.
Yes.
Do we need to be in minimal and moderate for 4 weeks, 2 weeks, 1 week? Thinking about Judy's comment about wanting to be fluid and be able to be nimble. How quickly do we want to be able to switch between open and close?
Is the 1 week, Sherry, is that in either direction?
Correct. And what they're saying now is the state is actually going to review your data twice a week. So the state will review each county's data 2 times a week, where before they were only reviewing it once a week. Now they're going to review it twice a week and move your tier after 1 week. Either direction.
Okay.
I'd recommend that we go with what the county is doing.
So 1 week, is that what, if we're in a tier for 1 week, that would mean we were actually meeting that data for 2 weeks. Does that seem sufficient?
Isn't that what the county just came out with?
Well, that has nothing to do with schools. What the county came out with has nothing to do with schools. What the county came out with is that they will change the tier of the county after you meet the benchmarks for that tier after 1 week.
Right.
So if we give it a week after that, that would be 2 weeks of meeting the benchmark of that tier.
Mm-hmm. Well, we want to be able to, as Judy said, we want to be nimble, but we most certainly want to be able to close in a timely fashion.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Right. So, for example, Siskiyou, both counties just changed. And in my mind, we would want to be able to react immediately in that direction and close the school. We don't want to wait another week.
Right.
If it's going to get better. I don't want to put people at risk. So perhaps it makes sense then to delineate between the 2 directions that our tiers go.
Mm.
Just a thought, because I don't want to be holden to again having to remain open for a week while Siskiyou is in purple. I don't want families showing up and the teachers aren't showing up, which is within their right, or vice versa. So perhaps we separate it, and we're able to move quickly when we drop down tiers. And then we add an additional week, making it a total of 2 weeks to open.
Rosemary, you're muted. I see your mouth moving.
It doesn't matter, I'm muted, so who? Anyway, just to clarify what you were saying, Bianca, you want 2 separate line items, so to speak, one for closing, one for reopening?
Correct.
Okay.
And I'm in agreement with Bianca. I think that's a smart way to go.
Bianca, can you attempt to verbalize what that would look like, and I'll type it here?
Sure. So if county is at an overall community risk level of tier 1 or 2 for any amount of time, the school facility will close. Do we need to add to it without board approval, or?
The way that I was looking at these criteria is, if we have these objective criteria that we're all agreeing to now, there would really be no need for the board to approve opening or closing, because you've already approved the criteria. So if we hit that, of course, I would notify you, and we would notify all the families and everything, but this is to avoid having to, post an agenda and all of that. So, so if county is at an overall community risk level of tier 1 or 2, the school facilities will close.
Yep.
If county, and then the one above, if county is at an overall community risk level of tier 4 or 3 for 2 weeks, is that what you had originally, is that what you were thinking, or 1 week? 1 week means actually 2 weeks of hitting that data.
Right. I think my opinion is 1 week because it's actually 2 weeks.
I'm in agreement with that as well. The 1 week.
Maybe I'll say will open, not may open.
Okay, good.
Tier 1 is called widespread. I forget what tier 2 is called.
Yeah. It's, I just wrote it in the email to you and I had to look it up because I was like, what? It starts with an S. It's like, it's not subversive, but it's something like that. It's, shoot.
Severe.
No,
Substantial.
it's, that's close. I'm looking it
What
up
tier
here.
are we in now? What tier are we in now?
We're in, that's what we're talking about. What's that one called?
Oh, okay.
We're in tier 3 right now.
I thought Humboldt was in 2.
It got bumped
Oh
up.
yeah, 2. You're in 1, we're in 2.
Right.
Yeah.
It's called substantial.
Is that what it is?
Yeah, I looked it up. It's
Okay, thank
widespread
you.
substan-
I was just looking, I couldn't,
widespread
substantial.
Thank you, Mary.
Yeah, it's
Okay, thank
widespread,
you.
substantial, moderate, minimal.
Okay.
Thank you, Mary Ann.
I could do this cleanup later. Okay, so I think we have 2 finished. All right, number 3, county testing is available within 24 hours of request for appointment and turnaround for results is 24 to 48 hours. I think I mentioned on the Humboldt County Public Health website, it says 24 to 72, but I can't find this data at all for Siskiyou. So this is one we debated just taking out. We had different ideas on this.
The turnaround time is out of our control. So maybe we want to take it out.
Well, and just so you guys know, we being Wendy and I and Henry went through this already. And, testing is not available 24 hours, within 24 hours. I mean, right now we can't even get an appointment. It's scheduled out so far now because of the big rush right now. So that's a misnomer as well.
Yeah. My son got exposed potentially, and he can't get tested until next Tuesday.
I think that
So should we just take this metric out?
Yes.
The other thing, just to throw another thought in here, is part of reopening plans, schools reopening plans, is all the staff are required to be tested on a secular nature. You can do half of your staff every 2 weeks or, however you want to do it, but everybody has to be tested within a certain time period. And that's proving to be pretty difficult right now. That schools that have been open, have been having a hard time having that done. For a while it was doing okay, but now it's gotten.
Although it's a ways off, hopefully the new administration will follow through and make testing more widely available. I don't mean the school administration, Sherry.
I knew what you meant.
Yeah, because we're bottlenecked at the Redwood Acres.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so moving on, what has now become number 3, We have 70% of the schools within the county are doing a hybrid approach or have open facilities. And you guys remember we discussed maybe changing that to 60%. I think we kicked different numbers around, but the rationale for having this in is the liability issue. If you're doing what most reasonable schools in your area under the same circumstances are doing, there's less liability there. So, thoughts on that percentage?
My thought was a different way of looking at it, that 3/4 would be 75%, or
75.
3/4 of county schools. 3/4. It just seems to ring different as opposed to 70%. That's just my thought.
I like that thought.
Definitely the majority. 75% is definitely the majority of schools. If you're doing what 75% of the people are doing, that's pretty reasonable, I would say.
I'm comfortable with that.
Okay.
Okay, good.
All right, moving on to what is now number 4. Okay, this is the one I think we really wanted to revamp. 70% of staff feel the amount of PPE and protective equipment to ensure the safety of staff and students is sufficient. We felt this was very subjective, and we thought we would, instead of saying like what percentage of the staff feel something, I think maybe we discussed the idea of having a sufficient number of staff available to support the cohorting numbers that would be necessary, or something like that. So, you know, the cohorting guidelines are 14 students to 2 teachers, actually. So a total of 16 people in a classroom. You can have 14 to 1, 14 students to 1 teacher. And so if you're trying to cohort and you don't have enough staff to do that because they don't feel comfortable, or, you know, for whatever reason, you wouldn't be able to open your facility because you wouldn't have the staff to do that. So I don't know how to make that objective, but something about, you know, the necessary staff to support the cohorting guidelines.
Or what about completely flipping it and focusing on PPE and protective equipment?
Okay.
So look at it. I'm just throwing this out.
Yeah.
But what about the angle of the necessary PPE and protective equipment, such as, you know, every room in a facility will have an air purifier, or in, you know, a larger facility, Kurt would have to help me here, chime in, where, you know, there's an HVAC system, and that HVAC systems filters are, you know, a certain rated HEPA, that has a certain HEPA rating that's sufficient. You know, so if we take it away from a number of staff, but from an administrative or employer point of view, that X amount of PPE and X amount of protective equipment. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I've seen other schools reopening criteria, and they've actually listed like the number of, you know, each class needs to be equipped with 3 boxes of gloves, you know, that kind of thing. They've gotten very specific. I've also seen where they've listed the specific staff that they feel is necessary to be able to do in-person instruction. Like if their facilities were open, for example, based on the numbers of students they have and breaking them down in cohorts, they need X number of teachers, X number of, that kind of thing. So I've kind of seen this one addressed in a variety of ways. I'm open to whatever you guys think.
So the first thing you stated, I guess, is where I'm coming from. So, each classroom would have so many boxes of, like gloves or masks, hand sanitizer, air purifier in each room, that you have custodial services assigned between either cohorts, if we're shifting cohorts using the same room, or on a daily basis, at the end of the school day, that comes in and does the cleaning. Something to that effect, so that we're not implying that it's up to the teachers to do the cleaning, sanitizing, when it should be somebody else.
Well, in many cases, it is the teachers that will be doing it. So each facility is equipped with a sufficient number of PPE, air purification system, whether that be an air purifier or the MERV 13 filters, and custodial cleaning schedule. Again, though, sufficient just seems very subjective.
Mm-hmm.
What's sufficient to one isn't sufficient to another.
Does this overlap at all with the actual reopening plan that has to be submitted?
It does, Bianca. I'm glad you said that, because I was going to say that a minute ago and it kind of slipped out of my mind. The actual reopening plan does say something very similar to this. I think it says a 6-month supply, that we're going to open our facilities with a 6-month supply of PPE.
Okay, that's what I thought.
So maybe instead of sufficient, I should say that.
Yeah, if there's any concern about the relativity of sufficient, then 6 months seems to narrow it down.
And it would be in line with what we already have on the other side, so to speak.
Question too.
Yeah.
Julie.
Kirk was first. Go ahead, Kirk.
Oh, was he? Okay, go ahead, Kirk.
You know what, guys? I'm sorry. I can't see hands when we're in the share screen mode.
Let Kirk go first.
Okay.
And then Julie.
Yeah, I just was, thinking we could have all the PPE in the world, but if we don't have enough staff to, break it up into cohorts sufficiently small and that makes sense, then, that's something to take into consideration as well. Just do we really have the staff at each center to, maintain cohorts with any kind of fidelity?
Okay, I think I can see Sherry is typing in one that addresses that. But that's a good point, Kurt, because we can have, mountains of supplies, but if we don't have anybody to deal with it in an educational setting, what's the point?
We have a teacher who's a cancer survivor, and really doesn't want to even, and another teacher whose husband is, severely immune compromised and really, so, we're just going to have a situation where people are going to be really reluctant.
Sure.
Understandably,
Yeah. Okay, Julie?
I was just going to mention, I don't know if it said 6 months, Sherry, maybe you know better than I do, but I thought it said 3 months.
Oh.
3.
Yeah, that's what I thought too, 3.
You guys thought 3? Okay, you're probably right.
That, and then I also, you know, this probably doesn't mean anything, but we have no idea what a 3-month supply is going to look like until we get kids there. I don't have any idea what that's going to look like. I don't have any idea how many things we're going to be using, how many wipes we're going to be using, how much sanitizer we're going to be using. So when you wanted to rewrite this, I was thinking about everything that you put on there. And then I was just thinking that maybe, well, I'm going to end it with that 3 months. And then I guess we'll figure out what that looks like as we move forward, because we don't know.
You know what, Julie, thank you and Kirk both for, reminding me or telling me that it was 3 months in the reopening plan. You know where I got the 6 month from, Julie, is, and you guys probably remember this, that's what the state, the PPE, the state gave all the schools. They said it was a 6 month supply of the hand sanitizer they gave and stuff. They said that was supposed to be a 6 month supply. So I feel pretty confident that we already meet the 3 month supply because the state gave us 6 months according to them. And what they did is they based it on your number of students, how many students you had enrolled in your school. And they had some sort of calculation. And so we took what we got from the state and did that same thing per center. So however many students attended a particular center, we divided the whole thing up proportionately. So I feel we're in pretty good shape with that because plus we've ordered lots of PPE in addition to what we got from the state.
Well, let's just to be safe and cover ourselves, add a statement that, this will be reevaluated, and we can specify, a period of time or, something definite, but Julie's absolutely right. I mean, just like a lot of things, getting back together is going to take practice. Everybody's going to have to practice all these protocols and in real time. And the amount of things that we go through, we can all sit here in our chairs thinking, oh, this is great. But until we actually live it, we honestly don't know.
Yeah. I would recommend when the motion is made to adopt this reopening criteria, we say, or you could just direct me, it doesn't have to be in the motion, that we have this on each board agenda after like our reopening so that it can be evaluated in real time every single time.
That's a capital idea. That's really good.
Because you're right, this is a guess right now. This is a guess that this is sufficient criteria.
Right. Yeah, I would highly recommend that then that we have this so that we revisit it month in and month out.
Is there any guidance from the state or public health officials regarding students' use of face masks or any PPE?
Yes, it's required.
It is. By the state or by the counties?
Both.
Okay. And will we have, with that supply, did they send masks for the
They
students?
did. Children's size and adult size, paper and cloth.
Okay.
So how do you feel about 4 and 5? Because I just wrote those as we were talking. 4 is each facility is equipped with a 3-month supply of PPE, an air purification system, and a cleaning schedule that allows for staff and student safety. Does that seem okay? And then 5, a sufficient. Yeah, go ahead.
How about saying health and safety?
Thank you. I like it. Okay, 5, I don't like the word sufficient, but I didn't know what else to put here. A sufficient number of staff needed to support cohorts as described by the state public health cohort guidance. And the reason I listed state public health cohort guidance is because they're the ones that are regulating how many kids can be together at a time, like how many we're allowed to have in our cohorts. So we would need the number of staff to be able to support that. I would argue we would also need office staff too. Like I'm going to need somebody to do payroll still.
Sure.
Those are things that are still going to happen. But those kinds of positions can mostly work from home if need be. If it's a staff member who is not comfortable coming in and they have a position that allows them to continue to be, isolated, that's fine. But once we open up, the teachers are not going to have positions that allow them to stay isolated. They're going to be around students.
So we can look at different terms for sufficient. Could be adequate. I mean, it still connotates the same thing. Does it just look and sound better? Or even
an appropriate number? That's another
appropriate
one.
Or
necessary? What about necessary number?
Yeah,
there
necessary
you go.
Or required.
Required's good too. How about a necessary number of staff required to support cohorts?
There you go.
Very good, Sherry.
That was a group effort, Jerry.
I don't know, required though?
Yeah, we have to have a credentialed staff member for every 14 kids or less.
Right.
That is a requirement.
Yeah, that's, I like that. I like that statement.
You mean, so we don't have any classes right now that are, required by COVID protocols? Never mind.
Yeah.
Yes.
Required by the state public health cohort guidance.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Sorry, I blew up.
No, that's okay. Okay, number 6, 100% of staff must complete the COVID-19 and integrated pest management training. Should I spell that out for you, Rosemary?
As a matter of protocol, yes, you should spell it out, and then in parentheses put IPM.
Yep.
There you go. And I think we're all in agreement with that. 100% of staff need to do that training.
Right. Now,
Okay.
I have a question about what about visitors to learning centers or even the admin offices?
So that was something that was in our actual reopening plan. We said that visitors would be limited and only, kept to what is necessary. So the idea of the parent volunteers that we've had in the past in some centers, that's just not going to, happen anymore.
Okay.
Because we have to limit the number of people on campus.
Sure. What about substitute teachers?
Yeah. Substitutes are not something that we normally have, period, because we're independent study. Often if it, sometimes I would say a Cutton Learning Center is really the only, it's not the only center. Sometimes the Bryceland Learning Center sometimes will have a substitute, but it's very rare because usually if a teacher is unable to be there and they know in advance, they just let the parents know that they're going to do independent study that day. But if they don't know it in advance, then often what has happened in the past is, somebody else on campus works with those students, or those students go into the room of another teacher or something like that. But in this case now, if a teacher is unable to come last minute because they're sick, they're really just going to have to notify the families and let them know.
Right. I'm just trying to think of every
I'm glad you
conceivable contingency.
Yeah.
So
okay, Mary Ann has her hand raised. I can see that one.
This might not be the time or place for it, but exactly what you're talking about is just for reopening, but are we also building the protocol for when a student or a teacher tests positive?
Yeah, no, that's not what this is. You're right. This is just for reopening criteria. When a teacher or student tests positive, there's already a protocol for that. That was prescribed by the county health department.
Okay, I wanted to make sure because that so far,
and that's already happened, Mary Ann. We've already had positive cases.
Oh, well, I've just missed out, haven't I? I get tested every I have my appointment every 2 weeks. I just get tested every 2 weeks because, so.
So then
so
number
far,
7,
okay.
centers must submit and have approved a center-specific reopening plan. I think that one's pretty
Yes,
cut and dry too.
right.
Okay. Well, I think we might have finished that unless you feel like you want to go back and, I don't know,
That
relook
looks
at it.
pretty good.
Again, we can bring it back every month.
Sure. So at this point, to my fellow board members, is there anything missing that, or something you think should be added?
I have two things. One, I'm curious, the 75% of schools, item number 3, how many schools in Humboldt right now are opened? Do you know, sharing with the hybrid approach?
Let's see, I think I might have it right. No, I have it here someplace. I shared that with you on Thursday. At Thursday, I think it was 50 something percent.
Okay.
And on Thursday, Siskiyou was 80 something percent, but that has changed since then. In fact, by the time we had our board meeting on Thursday, it was even lower than that because Mount Shasta had already announced that they were going to distance learning, and since then a couple others have as well. So Humboldt definitely doesn't meet number 3 right now. Siskiyou still maybe could meet number 3, but of course they don't meet number 1, which is, or number 2. They're in the widespread tier.
My fear is that 75 is just too high.
Too high.
Not going to allow us to be able to open. There might be schools who decide just to stay shut down the entire year because they have larger populations and it's more difficult.
Right. Right.
Yeah. It's funny, Bianca, there is already a school in Humboldt County who before the school year opened announced that they were going to stay closed the entire year. And they're sticking to that. They're not changing. They just felt like it was best to just let their parents know up front that this is what was happening. But it's not a big school. It's a tiny school. They only have 8 kids or something like that. It's a very small school, but they also only have 2 staff members. And that was their big issue is, as soon as one staff member wasn't able to come, that was kind of a big deal for them. So that you're right. Some schools may decide that they never open. Before we changed our tier status this week, a couple schools in Humboldt had already voted to open on January 19th. And so I knew that at that point, we would probably get pretty close. I had 70% there originally. I knew we would probably be pretty close to that. But now that the tiers have changed, I don't know how many are going to open on January 19th. It's unsure.
Bianca raises an interesting point, and then it gets back to Judy Nelson's comment about being quote nimble, being able to move one way or the other. So we've dropped it down to the 1 week, which then makes it 2 weeks, and it's just caused me, it's just crossed my mind that, well, why are we even concerned about whether or not a certain percentage of other schools are opening or not?
Like I said, it was strictly the liability. Remember, that's the justification. Okay. Is the attorneys have told all of the schools, or the guidance we've been given is that you have less liability if you're doing what the average person would do in the same circumstances. Okay. So that's why we put that. We don't have to. We can take that out. We could say majority, 51%, because, it's a safety in numbers kind of thing.
Yeah, well, rethinking it then, so, and you just, to me, use the word majority, and that just has a ring to it that, yeah, I mean, if the bar is pretty high at 75%, 3/4. So taking all 7 into consideration, because it's, I mean, well, first let me ask. So it's all or none. All this criteria has to be met before we can. So
Correct.
with that in mind, then we can say a majority. So a majority is 51%.
Mm-hmm.
So what do my fellow board members think about changing it to a majority of schools within the county, as opposed to the 3/4, 75%?
Well, and I'm good.
Rosemary or Jeff?
Yeah, I'm good with that, and it's not written in stone. I mean, we revisit it every month, so you know we can change it next month if we need to. So you know, I mean, I'm okay with that.
Okay.
75% does make sense. However, it does set the bar, as you said, Jerry, pretty high.
And if you look at it from the standpoint of trying to adopt a criteria that's, you know, in good faith, that we could move into reopening quickly if all the pieces, all the criteria are met, then then we can ask ourselves, does dropping it down to 50%, 51% majority, subscribe to that belief that we're setting ourselves up to move back to reopening as quick as possible.
I like that.
Yeah. Plus, if it just doesn't seem right to all of us, I don't think we're going to make that decision anyway. You know, that we're not going to just go, well, heck, you know, there's only 20% of the schools opening, but we think we should open. I mean,
yeah.
I think logic kind of stares us in the face a little bit there. So, yeah.
Right. Okay. So
Jerry, I've noticed a few hands. I think that I feel like the board has kind of come to a consensus on this right now, but I have noticed some hands up from members of the public that maybe would like to comment on this. Would this be a good time?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, Judy's hand is up.
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to check in about the parent volunteers. I was trying to find exactly where in the reopening plan it does talk about that, and I wasn't able to find it. But I feel like when I read it before, there's something that does discuss that there is some allowance for like essential volunteer duties. And I just would like to encourage you guys that, like, if there is any possibility of allowing parent volunteers, that you should include them in needing to complete that COVID training, right? Because unfortunately, at the Willow Creek Learning Center, it seems that because the support staff was let go and then hiring is frozen, we're unable to have, say, the person who would be the one to check the kids in and do the temperature screening and do these things. At this moment, there is no funding for that position. And so I would encourage you to look at, like, in that reopening plan, and maybe if you guys know where that is in there, we can see what it is, but I would just like to leave that possibility open, because that is an essential service, you know, that could be performed by a parent volunteer. And I want to make sure that if that is a possibility, that's covered in this plan, to have them do the COVID training and leave that open, that there could be the possibility of essential parent volunteers.
Thank you, Judy.
Thank you, Judy.
Okay, and then the other hand I saw was Marianne Lyons.
Go ahead, Marianne.
That must be
left
I
over.
don't remember what the thought was now. It was too far back.
Okay. All right. Well, that was it.
Okay. So let me go back to my board members. Are there any additional comments or statements or questions you have at this juncture?
I would like to discuss the idea of staff who are going to be interacting with students getting a COVID test prior to seeing them, and then if we think that there should be a schedule moving forward. And I can't believe I'm saying it. I'm definitely the type of person that's like, free will. Don't want to make anybody do anything to their body that they don't want to do. But when we're talking about a public health crisis, putting other people at risk, especially children, it seems that we should at least discuss it.
I mean, that's a really good point. One of the things I think we're running up against is the availability of testing, and definitely in a timely manner. I mean, I definitely get where you're coming from. I'm an advocate of the same kind of belief, but we're up against something that's so unprecedented in our lifetimes. So, the conventional wisdom, is, we can't apply a standard that's gone on before. So things are very, very different. But we're just up against this wall of not being able to get tested when we want to get tested. And then the flip side of that is, if you do get tested, how long is it going to take to get the dang results back? It's like a catch-22.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have an answer.
Yeah, but then you're right, because if you get tested on a Tuesday and it comes back on a Friday, all the exposure that you may have had in between, it's for naught, or it could be for naught.
And I, based upon everything that's we've been hearing, the rapid test is in comparison of, the two types of tests, the rapid test is the most unreliable. So where do we go?
Yeah. I wanted to, again, lay it out on the floor so we could discuss the ideas and the possibilities and bring together our group knowledge.
Well, I still think it's wise to recommend, or I don't know if I can say require, but definitely highly recommend the testing. And I don't know what legal basis we'd have to say required. Sherry would have to.
Well, the health department has already required it, and they do have the legal authority to do that. It is a requirement. It's a specific schedule in which school staff has to be tested. And as you were talking, I was trying to find that guidance and I couldn't find it quickly, but and Kirk or Julie, if you remember it, Kirk's got his hand up. It's like all of your staff has to be tested every 2 months. Is that what it is? So half of your staff can be.
You can do it more.
A minimum, you can do it more, but that is what is required. So half of your staff could be tested 1 month, and then the second half the second month, so that by the end of the 2-month cycle, everyone's tested. Or you could do a quarter, however many each week or something, an eighth each week, so that by the end of 2 months, everybody's done. But that is what's required by the county public health, or state public health, actually. But so that's what's written into our reopening plans. And I couldn't find it, but Judy, while I was looking for it, I found the thing about the volunteers. And so I'll email that to you later. But anyway, so yeah, I couldn't find where that is, but I know it's in there. And I know that there has been guidance from county health on that, or the state health on that. So that's the recommended guidance. So that's what we'll be following.
I definitely would favor a shorter cycle then, as opposed to longer.
Well, the county public health departments, both of them, Humboldt and Siskiyou, told us that currently they can't meet that, the every 2 months for school employees. So it doesn't matter if we say we want them to do it more often than that, it can't happen, just because that's so many people that they would, that would be clogging up the testing system for them. And in fact, in Humboldt County, Dr. Terry Frankovich, she said that right now we can't even meet the every 2 months.
Well, again, maybe by the end of January, with the change in circumstances, testing will become a priority. So, but again, as Jeff has pointed out, and we all know, we can change it. We're going to be revisiting this monthly, and as the information comes out of more availability, then we adjust accordingly. So. Okay. So where do we stand then with what you raised, Bianca?
I don't think that in my opinion, I don't think that we need to add anything to the reopening plan that we just edited.
Okay. Anyone else? Rosemary, Jeff, have something to bring up at this time?
I don't.
Okay, so my sense of it is that I think we've reached a point where we're ready to make a motion on the reopening criteria. So if that's correct, then is somebody willing to specify that in a motion?
I'll make a motion to accept the reopening criteria with the changes that we have discussed, and also to continue to add this to further agendas for reevaluation on a monthly basis.
I second
Okay.
the motion.
Very good.
One other thing, I tried to get in there before you got that second in, but that's okay. Remember, I wanted to ask the intention on whether or not, when this, let's say we are open and we fall short of one of these criteria and we have to close, does that closure apply to those one-on-one groups?
Oh.
So you guys can vote and just tell me what your intention is on that, but give me a directive on that. Linda's got her hand up.
Go ahead, Linda.
I missed that whole motion. It's my dog's dinner time, and they were barking the entire time that she was saying it.
Okay, Rosemary, you wrote it down, so read it back to her verbatim.
Okay, I make a motion to approve the reopening criteria with the changes we discussed, and also to continue to put this on further future agendas for reevaluation.
And Bianca seconded it. So, okay, we'll go ahead and do the vote. So it's been moved and seconded. And all those in favor signify by saying aye. Bianca?
Aye.
Rosemary?
Aye.
Jeff?
Aye.
And I also approve. Motion carries. So Sherry asked the question as to, does this apply to special education students?
And the intervention students.
And excuse me, and I was, thank you. I was at a loss for the next word, intervention students. Or does this apply to everyone, or everyone except those groups?
I think it should, I think that the students that are at high risk educationally, the least amount of disruptions to them, they would benefit. And so I would like to say this does not apply to them.
What do you think, Jeff? Do you agree or not?
I'm having a tug of war between my heart and my head. I want to agree, but my head is telling me no. I mean, I think safety is safety, and to think that there's not going to be some kids that are going to fall through the cracks is, I mean, I hate to say it, but it's going to, not just our school district, I mean, across the nation. It's an epidemic. But I still think we kind of got to hold, I think, some kind of line for safety for everybody. And I don't know anything that's bigger than that, that would kind of move my mind, I guess, to not feel that way. I'm still leaning towards a more prudent, structure to it. So
Can I just point out, if that's the case, that means those intervention groups couldn't happen right now because we don't meet this criteria right now. And I don't think that was the intention. I think you guys thought, moving into phase 3 would potentially be able to start now.
Sherry, I was going to say this very same thing. After hearing from Jeff, I wanted to hear from Bianca, and then I was just going to point out to everyone that 3.2, we just approved phase 3 with one-on-one, it's not groups, but one-on-one, which included, intervention groups and special education students. So, doing the approving 3.2, are we being consistent or inconsistent with our previous action? So, I mean, I would argue that to be consistent with our previous action is that, yes, we would allow the one-on-one intervention students to continue to meet, as well as the special education students, which I think by law, we're required to
The special ed students, yes.
have to do. So I just put that out there, you know, before we arrive at some kind of official direction for Sherry.
Okay.
Does that,
Rosemary, you pulled me over.
I didn't do that. Jerry did.
so Bianca, haven't heard your thoughts on this.
You know, my understanding was that the one-on-one intervention students and our special education students would move forward as they have been, right? The only thing that I'm evaluating is if we were to reopen, meeting all the criteria, and then we slide back and we close. At that point, do we allow it to cover the one-on-one intervention students? Do we allow them to continue, or do we say we just need to take a pause, everybody needs to take a deep breath, maybe a test, whatever the case may be, and have them be home-based? That's where my consideration lies. And I guess my opinion then on that is that we hold a special board meeting and decide then.
Well,
I agree with you, Bianca. It's
yeah,
a moving target.
Right. I mean, why not? We've already set ourselves up to reevaluate this, and we all know we have a special board meeting option.
Yeah.
I mean, we're here now with a special board meeting option. You know, we always have that at our disposal. So there's we're not locked into month by month, and,
Right.
you know, enduring a long period of time where we just agonize over what's going on. We can't do anything about it.
Mm-hmm.
We have the power
Mm-hmm.
and the authority to meet. So
Yeah.
I agree. We're in an unprecedented time.
that's right.
If we had to meet every week, and I don't mean to, you know, get some bad nods there, but if that, I mean, honestly, I'm here for the long term as well. And you know,
You guys are awesome.
It's endeared to my heart, and I feel everything that the teachers are feeling, the students, the staff, you guys, you know, as our director. I mean, I don't know. It just every day it's in my mind about something, you know, and maybe because I have a special needs student at my house, you know, I'm dealing with it every day anyway. And so, but it's just, man, I mean, it is what it is. So I'm okay with whatever we do.
Right. Thank you, Jeff. So Sherry needs to know.
Either way, you'll have the option of deciding again later, whether you say, yeah, we'll allow it now, or we won't. Either way, you'll still be able to meet later. And
Well, what I heard was for right now, those interventions can happen. And if at some point when we open, if we slide backward, as Bianca said, we'll decide at that time if we're going to proceed with that. So that's kind of where it was left with me. Right now it's okay. Once we open, if we slide backwards, we'll face that as we get to it.
Okay, Jeff's agreed. Rosemary agreed.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Bianca agreed.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And I agree. So we're good.
See, Jerry,
Yeah.
I see Mary Ann waving here.
Yeah, I had to go on camera. My hand had been up for a while. I did have a question. I see in the criteria, it makes it seem as though it's the whole school. Will it be site specific? So if one site has all of their criteria met, they could open, but another site might not have their criteria met, as far as if they didn't do all of their training, or if they didn't have, enough teachers per student. So the way it looks now, it looks as though it's saying if the whole school, all sites, but shouldn't there be something in there that says per site? Because let's say Cutton is doing fine and another school isn't. You know what I mean? Does that make sense? Because we have a lot of different sites. Of course, we'd have to follow the county criteria, but if all the other criteria had been met and Willow Creek was ready to go, for example, but Cutton wasn't, does that mean that Willow Creek couldn't open?
Sherry?
Yeah, we did this as school criteria, not
School
center
criteria.
specific
So
criteria. It's school, it's criteria for the school.
For the whole school. So does that mean that if there's not enough teacher per student ratio at a school down here in Eureka, that none of our other sites could open?
I'm not sure what you mean about a school in Eureka. We only have one school in Humboldt and one
Well,
school in
right, one school.
Siskiyou.
That's what I'm
Means
saying.
center.
Sites, centers. Sorry, centers. I should say centers. So I apologize. I wasn't using the right verbiage. So or nounage. So let's say that Willow Creek's ready to go. EHS, Eureka Learning Center is ready to go and Cutton's not, for example. Just for example, Rebecca, I know you guys would be ready. Does that mean that none of the centers could open then?
As of right now, yeah, it's a school criteria.
Right. So should there be a caveat in there that says most of the criteria, but the two about having all of the COVID training, IPM training, and the staff to student ratio, could that be made center specific? It seems like that would make more sense. If everything else is being met, then why would Willow Creek not get to open because there wasn't enough teachers for the like Arcata Learning Center or the Bryceland? Do you see what I mean?
Yes.
I don't see how we're meeting those. It doesn't. So if one school doesn't have, enough teachers, then all the other, one of the centers, then none of the centers could open?
It's, Marianne, for the time being, this applied to Northern United Charter School, not individual learning centers. And we've held out the possibility, we've made it clear that we will revisit things on a monthly basis.
Okay.
But at the time being, that criteria applies all across the board.
Okay, I just wanted to be clear that I was clear on that
Okay.
that if one center didn't have enough teachers, for example, or they all hadn't done their training, that none of the centers could open. Okay, thank you, guys.
All right, moving on to number 4, the next board meeting. 4.1, possible agenda items would be first interim budget.
Hey, Jerry,
budget.
We're almost done.
Kirk had a comment.
Oh, I didn't.
Oh, I just wanted to piggyback a teeny bit on what Mary was just saying. My mind was always thinking, if the board voted to allow centers to open up, that doesn't mean they all have to, because we have one center that is going to be, just the way it's configured and the number of bodies available is going to be much more ready to open up than another center. So it kind of is the opposite of what she was talking about. Anyway, I just wanted to throw that out there, as that's kind of what I was thinking might be the case.
Right. Yeah, these criteria is what allows the school to open. Yeah, you're right. It doesn't mean that every center would necessarily open, but if all of these things are met, then all of the centers could if they're able to. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Or if there's not enough teachers, maybe all the teachers say we don't want to open.
Okay, so the first interim budget overview for parents and the organizational meeting. So and revisiting of the 3.2 and 3.3. Anything that has come up that's not on here, Sherry?
Oh, I have a long list. December looks like it's going to be a big meeting. We've already
Oh,
discussed
thanks.
appointing Bianca and Jeff, reappointing them to their terms. Of course,
Right.
the board meeting calendar, electing officers. All of those are things as part of the organizational meeting. The first interim for both schools, the budget summary overview for both schools, a foster youth MOU, the assumption of risk form that I wanted you guys to see, and then, of course, the reopening criteria again. That's what I know of right now.
Right, okay. Speaking of the calendar, so just to my fellow board members, just give some thought to how comfortable or not you are with the second Thursday of the month, 4 o'clock, and that do that in advance. You know, some of these things you can give some thought to in advance, in an effort to be efficient with our time. So, and then 4.2, the next board meeting date is December 10th. And with that, Linda, it's 6:50 and I adjourn this meeting. Thank you to the audience and everybody that's hung in there. And an important meeting, and see you on the 10th.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Happy
guys. I sure
Thanksgiving.
appreciate it.
See you later. Thank you, guys.